Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today let's make some placemats for outside. They're going to be quick and easy, stitch and flip method. Let's use some fun fabric and use the 10-degree Sew Easy ruler. We're going to be able to stitch and quilt these all at one time. The ruler is from Sew Easy, and it's a 10-degree wedge ruler. It starts with the measurement number 3, and that's the actual inch mark. So if you are measuring, 3 is 3. Now when you use this ruler, you can start anywhere in the ruler. If you want to start right on the edge, you can, or you can come up and start here. Anywhere in the ruler, you can start and end. This is what makes it very easy to use. For the placemats, I'm going to use that edge, and I'm going to come up to 10.5 inches. So this is going to be placed on fabric, and the wedges are going to be cut out of it. But this piece is not 10.5 inches because you have to remember you are missing those inches there. The strips are 7 3/4. So if I was to take this 3 mark and put it right onto the 3 where the ruler is, you'll be able to see that the measurements are all the same. It just is not starting at 0. So I'm going to cut my fabric at 7 3/4. You can cut it any width you want. It'll just change the size of the placemat. Just for ease, I'm going to put my fabric together right sides and cut it so I have one long strip. From here, I'm going to be able to cut my wedges. You're not going to start with that flat area right against the fabric. You need to do it so that it's on the straight of the grain. The ruler has a line down the middle, and that is the straight of grain. So you're going to keep the straight of the grain with the straight of the grain of the ruler, not using this edge. So for the first cut, I'm going to have that end meet up with that edge so that it's straight. And the measurement at the top is also straight. So the ruler is not going to go crooked. And that top measurement is 10.5 inches. And as long as those two lines are straight and that bottom is straight, you're good to go. I'm going to be able to cut that wedge. Now without moving that ruler, you need to cut this edge. Now you can take this fabric and turn it around and turn the ruler around, but I find it just as easy to take a second ruler, and while this is still in the right position, put that ruler right along that edge. So the two rulers are together. I'm going to hold the smaller ruler down, then I can remove the wedge and cut on the right angle. And cutting this way is a lot easier for me than having to twist my fabric back and forth. So this piece is going to be discarded. There is my first wedge. From here, the rest of the wedges are going to be really easy to cut. You're just going to move the ruler. So the first one was cut on this angle. I'm going to turn this around, make sure the bottom is straight, my measurements are straight up at the top, and cut the next wedge. When that one's done, you're going to be able to turn the ruler and do the next wedge. You're going to be able to continue this cutting all the way down your fabric. And as you're cutting, that last piece is going to be discarded. It's going to be that odd shape, just like the top one. I'm going to take all those wedges and just stick them in a pile. I'm only using 2 fabrics for this placemat. You can use as many colors as you want, but because I'm using 2, by cutting them together, I'm always going to have them in order when I get to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew the wedges right onto the batting and the backing all at the same time. I want to start in the center. And if you're using the same measurements as I have here, you're going to start with a piece at least 24 inches. And as long as you have a minimum of about 13-14 inches, you're going to be fine. I want to find a center mark. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a straight line along the bottom of my batting. Then I'm going to need to find the middle of that batting and draw a second line right down the center. The first wedge is going to go in the center of that line. But we're not going to start with that edge right at the bottom because this is a 3-inch mark. Take a ruler that has a 3-inch mark on it and match it up with the 3-inch mark. You'll see that all of the measurements are the same, but we need this much coming out of the bottom, which is 2 7/8. So I'm just going to make it an even 3. So I'm just going to put a mark where my 3 inch is going to go. And that center line is going to go down the center of that wedge. And if you just take that wedge, place it right along that 3-inch mark, you're going to be able to just make yourself some little placement lines. So you'll know exactly where to put that wedge without trying to find the center of that wedge. So it's starting at 3 inches, and I know that line is in the center. To keep my batting and my backing together, I did fuse the layers. I just find it's easier than using pins, but you can use any method you want to have the back and the batting stuck together. Now that we have the 2 layers done and we've got the first wedge on, we're going to be able to start sewing it. Now you can either pin that wedge down or just put a little bit of glue to secure it. The next is going to be sewing on the rest of the wedges. This is going to turn into a half circle. So we're going to keep all the wedges sewn together in the same direction. All of the wide pieces are going to stay at the top. All of the narrow pieces are going to be at the bottom. So you're going to have this opening when you're done. Work on one side at one time and then turn around and work on the other side. And for this application, I like to use a little travel iron. This one's from Clover, and it's a nice size for this type of job. So the next piece is going to be sewn right beside. So I'm going to just put the right sides together, and I'm going to stitch down a 1/4 inch. When the first wedge has been sewn on, I'm going to be able to just take that and fold it back. This is where I like to take that little iron and just give it a press. As you're stitching, some of these wedges might shift a little bit because you are sewing on the bias. And that's okay because we're going to be able to take care of the bottom after, and the top is going to be trimmed off. So I'm going to be able to just take my next piece, stitch it down, and then flip it over and press it. And do that right until you get off of your fabric. That last wedge is going to cover that line, and that's okay because we're going to be able to square this up. So I have half of the placemat done, and it's quilted as I went along. Now I'm going to be able to do the same thing that I did here, going in this direction. So just sew all the wedges on as you sew and press all the way down. It took 19 wedges to make this half circle. Now we need to fill in this hole. If you go into your kitchen, you're going to be able to find something that is going to cover that area. In my case, it happens to be a pot lid. So I know that all of my seams are going to be enclosed if I use this measurement. An easy way to make this half circle is to take the fabric that you want to put in here and fold it in half. I'm going to be able to draw my line on my fabric. And I don't need a full circle, so I'm not going to use one. Now I'm going to be able to stitch right on that line through both of the fabrics that are right side touching. If you take your stitches and make them smaller on the machine, it will be a lot easier to take and go around those corners and maintain that nice circular shape. Now you're going to be able to cut out that shape, leaving a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now this is a great time to use your pinking shears and trim that edge. And then I'm just going to cut right along that bottom. Once the shape's cut out, I can turn it right side out and press it so all the seams are flat. Now you're going to be able to take that shape and cover that hole. And by doing both fabrics the same on each side, if some of the bottom is peeking out to the top, you're never going to notice it. So just place the fabric on and then top stitch that circle right on. Once this is stitched on, the placemat is done, all except the binding. And to square it up, you're going to want to make it nice and flat on one side. But before I trim this off, I want to stitch it on the machine, and that's going to just secure it for me. So what I'm going to do, instead of cutting this off to square it up, I'm going to draw a line first. I know that is going to be the area that I'm going to cut off. But what I want to do is I'm going to do a row of stitching about 1/8 of an inch right from that cut line that I drew. That's going to hold these flaps down and hold this piece down so when you go to put the binding on, it won't shift. Now with these little flaps stitched down, I'm able to trim off the extra. And that stitching line is going to stay inside the placemat. And with it cut out, you can see how cute that placemat is. The placemat ends up being 11 inches by about 21 inches. Now if you want to make it bigger, you can. It's just a matter of making those wedges longer. So you'd have to cut your big strips wider to start with. Depending on how big your table is, will depend on how big you want your placemat. You can do all sorts of colors or just keep it 2. The fabric is from Timeless Treasures. It is an older fabric, but you might be able to find it still in some of your local stores. And to put binding on this, I would recommend the binding on the bias. If you cut your binding on the bias, you're going to be able to maneuver it better around that corner shape. And to put the binding on, it's no different than any other quilt, even though it has a curve. What you're going to do is do the corner exactly the way you would do the corner on a regular quilt. Then as you're stitching around this curve, because this is a bias, you're going to be able to just stretch it ever so slightly as you're stitching around that corner. And by stretching it, it keeps this edge a little bit smaller so that when it goes over, it's going to be easier to stitch. So just do that 1/4 inch seam and just pull that top a little bit and stretch it as you stitch down. You don't need to stretch the flat part, just that rounded area and just a little bit. I'll put a link in the description on how to make a bias binding and how to stitch binding on your quilts. When I cut the wedges, I cut them out of one width of fabric from both of the colors, and by doing that I'm able to get enough wedges that I can make 2 more placemats this size. So depending on the size of the wedges you decide, you're going to be able to get 2 to 3 placemats per width of fabric. This is a quick and easy project to make. You can use all leftover fabrics and it would be a fun thing. You could use child prints. You could even use some beautiful yellows and oranges and it would make this appear like a sun. It would be perfect for breakfast. With so many beautiful fabrics out there, this would be hard just to make one. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.